Well, hello everybody in YouTube land. This is my first attempt at making this 1978 Mini Clubman subframe, one with this 1971 Mini Clubman engine, in the attempts that it's so-called this engine is stuck or has stuck rings and has no compression. So my intention is to check this out and get this running on the bench or on this subframe and see if I can get it to run. So I'm going to be documenting that and hopefully bring you all along on a ride with me to see if we can get this engine started. And the first thing I'm going to need to do is manhandle and lift this how many kilo weight engine onto this subframe, and I'm going to do that by myself. The whole intention of my channel that's going to be put on is that I do all of the work myself with minimal tools, with anything that you have laying around. I pretty much work from my carport, which is a mess at the moment, and if you can get what I'm attempting to do done under a carport, you can do it anywhere. I have minimal tools and minimal money to get a lot of this stuff done, so I'm going to be doing a lot of this work myself. I'm not an expert and definitely not somebody that you should follow for advice, but definitely you could probably get ideas from what I'm attempting to do. So I'm about to move this motor. I'm going to manhandle it myself, and probably won't show that on video because, well, it's probably not going to be the most attractive thing, me lumping this thing onto this subframe, but we'll see how we go. Okay, well there we go. After a little bit of struggle, a little bit of manoeuvring, I've gotten the engine sitting roughly in its position on the subframe. So all I've got to do now is lift the subframe and get the engine mounts bolted back in on both sides, and once I'm doing that I should have the engine sitting on a nice platform. Now the reason why I'm putting it on the subframe is so that it's got a nice steady platform that if it does kick when I do run it, that it won't jerk and fall over. It'll be a little bit more stable and I'll feel a little bit more safe having it sitting on something a little firmer. I'm going to put a little frame around it to get it up off the ground so that it's sitting nice and secure. But that's the plan, and I'll get back to you shortly when I've screwed it all in. Okay, so one thing I did want to mention is I'm a bit of a tight ass and I don't throw anything out, and that's probably why my carport is such a mess. But when I've stripped cars down, I usually keep all of the fastenings and I soak them in a jar full of fish oil so they don't rust. The good thing is when I do have to find nuts and bolts, I've usually got them all on hand. It does require a bit of sorting, but they're usually there and ready to go. So yes, I found what I need for mounting this onto the frame, and I will just get on to doing that and show you when I'm done. Okay, well it's been some time later, but I have got the fasteners in to the engine mounts, and the engine is now basically with the subframe with the lower mounts. Obviously the upper mount and the torque that the engine's going to create is going to put some twist on those, but they're old mounts. Hopefully they'll hold. The idea of this is to get this up on some sort of blocks so I can work on it a little bit easily, and I do have a bunch of stuff I've got to move, including my 67 Deluxe Mini, which is sitting just under that tarp. So that's what I'm going to do now, is move everything around and try and get this thing back up on blocks, and I'll get to that and show you shortly. And as mentioned, for those that are wondering, here's my little 67 Deluxe with 1100 engine, which was my last project. I did do all the mechanical, and I did the paint job as well. So yeah, it turned out quite good. Okay, there it is. After much levering with old lintels that I've got and bricks, I have got it up into a position where it's relatively stable and the block is off the ground, so I can drop the oil if I need to. Yes, I know it's on concrete blocks. I know they're not the safest, but really it's not holding a car, it's only holding a small engine, and it's only really there to support the frame. So for those that want to mention about the concrete blocks, yes, I do realise that. But yeah, it's just so that I can get the engine to a position where I can comfortably work on it, because I know I'm going to be on it for quite a while. Well, the next thing I have to do is put on the carburetor and the manifolds. Yeah, that's them there, they're very old. I will be going and getting it cleaned up with some carby cleaner, and there's the gasket there. Do need to have that all set up, and that's what I'm going to do now, is screw this on. So basically we get the manifold, screw this guy off first, and get him all lined up and ready to go, and screw him down. Now I will have to find the fastenings for the rest of them out of my amazing jar. It's nice that the previous mechanic has cut my fuel line, which I could have just twisted off. Just to give you a little bit of a background, this engine was given to a mechanic and was selling it to a friend, and he gave it to a mechanic, and the mechanic said that it had no compression and he didn't want to have a bar of repairing it. Now, these engines aren't the most common anymore, and I do believe that I can get it to crank and start. I think it needs a heat cycle to unstick the rings, but we will see. I have to check spark, I've got to check compression, make sure the coil's right, timing's right for it to get a kick. But yeah, that's the basic plan, just to spend a little bit of time on it to get it to start, not thinking that the original mechanic probably had the time he wanted to put into it. But we'll see what happens. I could be completely wrong, and it could be a dead anchor, but we'll see what happens. Well, there it goes. So there it is. So I've got the manifold fastened down, ready to go. Get the carby all cleaned up in a second, and we've got to do a compression test. Now, the thing I didn't show you guys was it actually does turn pretty easy. So, you know, lack of compression could be a thing, but you can hear, if you listen carefully, there is a little bit of sound of compression. So I do know that the possibility is there for it to crank, but we've got to examine all of the other ins and outs first. Stay tuned. Well, there's been some advancement. I didn't film it all, but I did do a compression test on the cylinders, and we've got a wondrous low reading, 25 on the one cylinder, 50 on the second, 30 on third, and 57 on the fourth cylinder. So compression is low, and I'm guessing it's stuck rings, but I am going to clean up the points and kick it over and see if we have spark, check the coil, and just make sure that all of that's running, put some fuel to it and see if it will spark and kick over. And if it doesn't, then we've got to try and soak the rings, maybe put some nice thick oil in there, tops of the cylinders to improve compression and see if we can get it to kick over. But yes, very exciting. I'm not really. Alright, so just to give you a little bit of a rundown of what I've got here as far as my setup. So there's the stock 1100 engine sitting in all its glory, and basically it's sitting on a subframe, and I've got that sitting like that so that it's stable, and I've screwed the engine mounts, the lower engine mounts, down to the subframe, so if it does twist or turn as it starts, then it's not going to really move around too much. It will want to tilt this way when it starts, but obviously I don't have upper mounts. Wiring setup, I've got my 12-volt battery sitting here with my two leads, and they're both the same colour, so you don't get confused. And my negative is going down to the slave cylinder bolts there, and the positive over to the solenoid. I do have another couple of wires coming off the positive here, and first one being there's a spade connector which I'm going to be using to start the engine, and I've got an alligator clip on this one that I'm going to be using to activate 12 volts to the coil when I'm ready. So basically, engine sitting there. I've got the fuel set up. That's just gravity feeding down to the fuel pump, and I have confirmed the fuel pump does work, because I had the engine cranking off camera without spark plugs, and we did have fuel coming out of the fuel hose. There wasn't any fuel going into the bowl though, so the needle was jammed on the float. So taking this off, I did clear it out with a sewing machine needle, and it did have a bunch of gunk, rust or whatever, jammed up inside the needle. So there wasn't any fuel going there now. There is it's fixed up now. There is fuel heading into the float bowl, so we should be good for fuel. I did do an initial compression test. You'll see in part of the video later, and we did have pretty low compression on all four. There was 25 on one, 50 on two, 30 on 3, and 50 on 4, so pretty low, but as you'll see in a minute, I let it soak. I'll tell you, with this goop, ring seals, smoke repair. So I basically poured this down into the tops of the cylinders through the spark plug holes, and I tell you that was a task because it's so thick, so viscous. I ended up having to sort of feed it down my funnel with a little tube to try and push it into the cylinder, but I got about 2 tablespoons I guess in each cylinder and let it sit overnight, and the remainder I did pour into the engine, into the oil, so it's sitting at the backs of the rings. Let it sit overnight, did a second compression test, and the second compression test came out at 50 for the first one, for the first cylinder, 100 for the second. We got 100 for the third and 100 for the fourth, so pretty good on the second lot. Alrighty, so here we go. Here is our engine, and we're all set up. I'm going to put 12 volts on the coil and give it a little bit of choke, and fingers crossed. Well, that was good. That's the first run. Let's see if we can get it to idle. have it. She runs and idles. Now I know that wasn't the most informative video with the how-to, as again learning, but I do have another engine sitting over there behind my toolbox that I'm going to be doing the exact same thing to. This engine is a 1330, so it's a 1275 that's been worked to 1330, and it is going to be going in my 67 Deluxe. So that should be a good project. So there will be another video exactly like this, and I will be going through it step by step, making sure that everything's filmed. But this engine is pretty much done. I am going to do an oil change on it and make sure that everything's good to go, and I'm going to be then selling it on either to the fella that originally wanted to buy it or to somebody else. But it is a good motor. I have done a new compression test, or a second compression test after it ran for a while. I've done a couple of heat cycles, and now every cylinder is either on or just above 100 psi, so that's all 4 at 100 without any oil in the rings. So that's really, really good. So yeah, if you like this video, please subscribe, or at least like, and we'll see how future videos go. Thanks a lot.